Thank you, Cassie. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webcast today on Automate ZOS STIG compliance with real-time continuous security monitoring and simplified audits. My name is Yvonne Wheaton. I represent Software Diversified Services. Founded in 1982, SDS is a Minnesota-based company that has over a 36-year history of offering security, encryption, data compression, and network monitoring, customer-centric IT infrastructure solutions. Software Diversified Services has been named to the Cybersecurity 500 list for 2017 and 2018. SDS is an IBM partner in development and an advanced member of IBM Partner World. Here's our agenda today. Stu Henderson, founder of the Henderson Group, is an experienced consultant, one of the foremost ZOS security experts today. Stu Henderson will be discussing STIGs to emphasize the benefit of using STIGs in Benefits of Automation, Continuous STIG Monitoring for ZOS. Itzhak Mutzak, founder and managing director of SecuriTeam Software, creator of several conversion products as well as the company's flagship product, IronSphere IT GRC platform. Itzhak will be presenting STIG Automation, Standards and Market Solutions for Legacy Operating Systems, which will include a demo of IronSphere data. It's my pleasure to hand the presentation over to Stu Henderson. Stu?
Thanks, Yvonne, and thanks everyone for listening. Now, for a variety of reasons, it's become very hard for us to understand exactly what's going on under the covers of our ZOS computers. So we're going to give you a little history to see how we got in this situation, and then we'll talk about what we need to solve the problem, and we'll wrap it up with a summary and a call to action. So to start the introduction and history, a very long time ago, in the last century actually, IBM mainframe computers used punch cards. They were kept in a locked room. In the beginning, they only ran literally only one program at a time, and they felt it was a major accomplishment when we stepped up and we could run 3 or 4 programs at a time. We didn't know what was going on under the covers very often, but who cared? Everything ran fine, we thought. Well, then we added some complications. We added terminals, and sometimes those terminals were running literally thousands of programs at the same time on one computer. To complicate it more, we then connected it to the internet. And to help us understand what was going on, we added a log file called SMF that generates, nowadays, maybe 1 million records a day on a single CPU or LPAR, which gives us lots and lots of information if only we knew what to do with it. Well, we wrote lots of programs to read the SMF data, and the more the volume and the volume of records and the volume of data in the records, IBM kept adding new fields, new information, and even new record types. Now, back in those days, most shops had a stable of technically knowledgeable, very highly trained technicians who understood the internals, the hardware and the software of the mainframe. And they also knew a history, not only of how things had developed over time in general, but also how things had developed in your organization. We also had hardware and software monitoring tools that would measure the computer as it ran. The hardware tools were like a collection of voltmeters, and you would literally connect the cables to the circuit boards of the computer to measure things like CPU busy, or for a disk drive when it was reading data and when it was seeking and things like that. So we use the SMF log data and some of the monitoring data sometimes for a large variety of management controls. And this isn't just to make the auditors happy. These are tools that let managers do a good job of managing a data center. We use the SMF log data for capacity planning, for response time analysis and service level agreements. If we promise someone 5-second response time, we wanted to be able to report what we actually delivered. An incredibly important function here was problem management, recognizing when there was a problem with any production batch job, with any hardware, with any software, with the environment, finding out immediately what problems were occurring as they happened or almost immediately afterwards, let us deal with them and manage problems overall. But there's a lot of information you can get from the SMF data that lets you analyze what you're doing and reduce your overall cost. And last but certainly not least, security and audit information from the SMF data allowed us to produce reports on security and audit. And sometimes what we did was we said, well, what would be useful information? Tell me about every violation that occurred. And so we'd get a report that would have thousands of violations a day, and we wouldn't know what to do with them, but we'd get the report. It would show up every morning at 9 o'clock, and there we had it. So the SMF reports were sometimes considered a day late because usually it took an overnight processing to copy the data and make the reports. But sometimes they were so voluminous, there was so much data, and it wasn't organized on an exception basis or a trend analysis. It was just listings. No one read them, no one understood them, and no one cared about them. Well, we complicated things even more then. We added security software, RACF, ACF2, or Top Secret, and then our mainframe technical staff, these people who had been holding everything together with their deep technical knowledge and their memory of how things had developed in the organization, they started retiring, and because of budget crunches and other reasons, we didn't replace them. And IBM then added more technical stuff. It's unbelievable how complicated things got. They added Unix, USS to the mainframe. On top of that, they added TCP/IP. Then they added MQ series for message queuing in financial institutions. They added Policy Agent, the firewall for TCP/IP, and the distributed data facility to talk to DB2. And then this blows the distributed people away. Java talking to CICS, because you can run Java on the mainframe. You can do almost anything on the mainframe. It got more complicated, and then we partitioned CPUs into LPARs, and we combined them into sysplexes. Couldn't have gotten any more complicated. And about this time, the auditors came by. And the way they would audit us was they would compare what we had in our shop. Well, if they didn't know any better, they had a checklist, and they'd compare what we have against what was on their checklist. Now, there was a problem with the encryption algorithm in Windows. I don't know if it's still there, but for a long time, there was a quirk in the encryption algorithm for Windows passwords, so that if the password length was less than 14, the passwords were much easier to crack. So some auditor came up with the idea that passwords should have a minimum length of 14, and of course uppercase and lowercase and all sorts of things. And they developed this for their Windows checklist, and then they came and tried to apply the Windows checklist to mainframes that at the time didn't support lowercase and also had a maximum length of passwords of 8. We hadn't invented password phrases yet. And so we went into a back and forth with the auditors. They're saying we had to meet their checklist, and us saying we can't, it's impossible, and that went downhill. All the time, our tech staff getting grayer haired and heading toward retirement. Then we heard about a European Service Bureau, and there were lots of other stories, but this is the best one known. It's the Logica hack. It was a mainframe data center for a service bureau. It got hacked over the internet. We'll give you some details on that later. But the hackers were inside, had their run of the mainframe computer for months before management was even aware of being hacked. So to wrap up the introduction and history, we've got some conclusions. We need to develop our own security standards to compare against. If we don't develop our own and make them our own policy and standard, then the auditors are going to use their own checklists to audit us against. Also, we'll find that if we don't develop our own checklists, we can't use them for our own management controls. More and more, things have gotten more technical, and our technical staff is thinned out. We need help in addressing all of these technical issues. With the volume of data and the complications of the technology, we need better data collection and reporting so that we know what's going on under the hood, and we have to make this happen while our mainframe tech staff is thinning out. Now we need a starting point for all this. If you took a new hire or even an experienced mainframe person and said, okay, figure out what reporting we need, and his first question likely will be, well, what are the purposes of the reporting? And that could be a long discussion right there. We need a starting point. For security and audit in particular, we need someone to say, well, here's a starting point. Here's a checklist you could use as a guideline and use this and tailor it. Now, we'd want an easy way to be able to tailor it so that we can say, but in our shop, this is what we do and this is why we do it. So we need someone to hand us a starting point. We also need the ability to modify it and tailor it easily. Once we have this standard and are modifying it to suit our own situation and making it our official policy, so when the auditors come by, we can say, this is our policy. We expect you to use this, not your Windows policy, when you audit us. But we need an automated method to compare actual settings to the baseline standard. You can't do this by hand. It's too much data. There's too much going on. And we want this information immediately. If you get a report the next day that someone's been hacking in your system, it's too late. The check will have cleared. And so you really want to find out when it's starting to happen or as it's happening. And again, we need automated tools for that. So that's the introduction in history. I hope I've got you all uncomfortable. We'll tell you a little bit more about some things that auditors know. And the first thing is, I hope most auditors know this. Peter Drucker, the management consulting guru, was the one who said this first. You can't manage something if you don't measure it. And this applies to every one of the management controls, including security, but also capacity planning and so on. Now, the measurement is meaningless. If I tell you that something is equal to 75, so what? You have to have a standard to compare it against. If you get a measurement and you don't have a standard to compare it against, it's meaningless. If I tell you the temperature outside is 85, and you don't know whether that's hot or cold or centigrade or Fahrenheit, it's sort of hard to put any meaning to it. So you need a standard to compare against. If I say the temperature outside is 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's the hottest it's ever been in September for 15 years, that might mean something different to you. But without the comparison to the standard, now the thing you compare it to could be what's happened in the past, or a regulation, or your own standard if your management decides what is acceptable. Talking more about what auditors know, auditing is defined as the evaluation of the adequacy of control. Not all auditors know this, but this is what they're supposed to be doing, looking at the controls that you have to say, are they adequate for whatever purpose? For computer security, for making sure that the financial statements are reasonably reliable, and so on. And then the next question, of course, is what is a control? The essence of control is comparison to a standard, as we said, with the temperature being 85 degrees. If you don't have your own standard, the auditors are likely to use their own checklists, and they may or may not be useful to you. If you don't have your own standards, some audit approaches, they're starting to say, what management controls do you have in place? We're not going to just use our checklist on what your security settings are. We're going to look at your policy and your baseline documents and your standards and your procedures and say, have you put formally in writing, have you documented the things that you need to be doing and how you do them to have good security or good financial integrity or good capacity planning or whatever? So auditors are starting to use a phrase, they say test of design. They say, have you designed the controls and documented them in writing? And one of the reasons for this is if your good technical staff is close to retiring and you're going to be bringing in new people, then you'd want some documentation of why things are set up the way they are right now. Now, a lot of data centers don't have baselines. They don't have documents saying how the options are supposed to be set, but the baselines For example, if you say within our MVS Parm Labs, these are all the options that we have set here. This is why. This is our standard for the security options in the MVS baselines. You can use that as a standard, and you can almost force your auditors to use that as the standard to compare you against. Now, if you want a starting point, the US government gives us several starting points. You may have heard of the STIGs, Security Technical Information Guideline. They're not laws, they're not regulations, they're guidelines, but it's a very useful starting point. We'll give you a link to pull these down. There's some other documents we'll point you to, but the STIGs for mainframe security in particular are extremely good starting points. Now, if you have your own standard, you can convince the auditors to use that instead of their own checklists. And the last comment we've got on what auditors know is preventive and detective controls, or preventive and corrective controls are better than detective ones. If you have some automated comparison to a standard, a control, that detects something happening beforehand and lets you prevent it, or actually does the prevention. If someone tries to break in over the internet to your mainframe computer and you've got something that recognizes it and prevents it, shuts something down, or disables some connection, then that's a preventive control. It's before the event even happens, we stop it from happening. Corrective controls would actually do whatever adjustments are needed to fix the problem. Detective controls are the ones where you get the report the day after. And if the guy's been into your financial systems and his check is already cleared, the detective ones controls may be a little bit too late. Oh yeah, someone took $10,000 out of accounts payable last night. Doesn't do you a lot of good if it's after the fact. So we're ready to wrap this up now. We've covered a lot of ground. We're going to wrap it up with a summary and a call to action. Our lives will be simpler. This is stuff you want to do. Find easy ways to start developing and formalizing your own standards or baselines. Take advantage of the work the government has done to get us started. Take the STIG and have someone on your staff tailor it to your requirements and set up some sort of arrangement where you can modify it in the future easily without a whole lot of hassle. You want to find automated but still flexible ways to compare whatever is on your system with your own standards. Now, you don't want thousands of pages listing possible exceptions or things where the things don't match what the baseline says they should be. You want to reduce the volume of reporting so that you can use it, make it actionable reporting. So you're going to need real-time exception reporting. Don't list everything that went wrong. Tell me when it exceeds some limit that I've established on the basis of what I know or what I think is reasonable or what things have been in the past. Identify trend analysis. Don't have reams of listings. Do real-time exception reporting and trend analysis. That wraps us up. Thanks very much for your kind attention. We've got some links to useful information for you, including you can see the STIGs, and there are some other ones that you'll get from the federal government and some other sources. And I think that takes care of us. Thanks everybody for listening. If you have any questions, I hope you'll speak up and let us know, and I'll turn things back. Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you, Stu. I'd like to now turn the presentation over to Itzhak Mutzak, Standards and Market Solutions for Legacy Operating Systems. Itzhak?
Thanks, Yvonne. Hello, everyone. The presentation discussed the need for automation of security readiness reviews in order to respond to changes of attack methods used by hackers in modern life. Hackers, attackers, internal or external, you name them, all of them need an entry point to your systems and need authorized access to resources. These are controlled by what we call security controls, ESM resources. ESM stands for RACF, for External Security Manager, like RACF, Top Secret, ACF2. And the security control can be ESM resources, as we just named, palmlib settings, file settings, and so on, each of which is called an attack vector. Altogether, they create the attack surface. That's what attackers are using. As a sample of attack vector is the APF list, which is listed below on the screen. The APF list, which allows switching from problem mode to supervisor mode, is controlled in a way that can be used by an attack vector, as an attack vector. Datasets in the list are not on the volume specified, does not exist, or any other misconfiguration issues. In order to configure our system, we are using CSM, or Configuration Setting Management. And configuration setting management is a method to define your assets and the required values that together creates a secure environment. The security environment minimizes the risk of existing attack surface. The process of configuration setting management is executed by visiting security controls, detecting the actual state or value, and compare it to the desired values, again, described in the CSM. The desired value is dictated by a standard or a best practice. The result is a list of tasks you need to perform in order to lock down your systems. And the security controls locking process is called hardening. There are predefined frameworks that defines the security controls and the defined settings or required settings. CS benchmark and STIG framework are fine examples for those. STIGs is the only framework that defines configuration setting management for legacy systems, mainly ZOS, and this is why we are presenting them in front of you. And this is why we will use them later in this presentation. Trade secret, etc. SBI, or as we call it, sensitive but unclassified level, usually indicate internal procedures used by federal agencies, which are not published public. Last level is public information that you can get from other resources like the internet. The combination of confidentiality and assurance levels create 9 different levels. When using STIG framework, you need to define the organization confidentiality level and align with the assurance levels related to them. So how we implement CSM today? Usually you don't. My experience is that most sites doesn't have the required skill set or the time to perform that. They may have commercial to perform STIG checks. However, these tools or services requires high level of mainframe knowledge. Assuming that you do implement CSM, the use of these tools requires computer resources to collect the information and save them into a database. Remember, these products are limited to a single image, so you should run them on each image separately, consuming CPU resources, saving into a database. Once the data is collected, an expert should generate and analyze the report. The bottom line is that manual assessments are lengthy, expensive, and tiring. The attributes of manual risk assessment, the length, expertise needed, human-intensive resources, and so on, leads to the fact that they are performed in annual cycles. Meanwhile, the systems are configured contiguously changing as a result of business requirement, new versions of products, other requirements that generated changes. This leads to a gap between the security control's desired state and the actual state. In other words, most of the time, you're not in compliance. At the same time, the hackers are doing well. They have automated tools and the knowledge. Part of them are stolen from ethical companies and agencies. They have a motivation driven by terrorism, like homeland resources, or criminal. They're interested in the money or the data you store or you have. They are well funded by their senders. We call the way they perform attacks, the automated way, algo hack, as they're using algorithms developed by others to perform attacks, much like the stock exchange that moved from manual trading to algo trade. You may see this move to automation in many other fields of life. At the same time, the target of attack, us, uses manual procedures to protect our organizations, like the product we mentioned before. It is an unfair challenge. The idea of STIG automation is not new. SCAP and ISCM are here from around the year 2000. NIST, the National Institute for Security and Technology, get into a conclusion that the then 3-year cycle of security assessment is not reasonable anymore. ICM is a concept they created that defines the need to investigate and monitor security controls in much more frequent way. The goal is to supply decision makers with accurate information as input to their decision-making process, and to make security overall status more visible, more clear, and up-to-date. The effect of ISM CSM is dramatic, as ICM reports at near real time on security defects. The stakeholders can respond much more quickly to the risk. As you can see from the graphs presented here, the frequency affects compliance. So what is the answer to the new automated tools which attacks our organizations? We offer IronSphere, which is an IT GRC for legacy and automates the STIG process. IronSphere requires no mainframe knowledge or even access to a mainframe or logging to a mainframe. You will use a browser to access the results generated by the CSM process of IronSphere. IronSphere starts at IPL as a subsystem and stops at the end of day when you shut down the mainframe. It requires no human intervention during this period. The diagnostic routines ran by IronSphere, which implements the STIG checks, does not leave any evidence or results behind on the mainframe. They send them securely to the IronSphere server. IronSphere itself uses STIG severity ranking system, which is simple to understand. Everybody can understand what is high, medium, and low risks. We tried to show the forest as well, not only the trees. So we calculate the overall security rank to the agent OS. What I mean is that not only a detailed report with the security level assigned to each of finding, but also the big picture, how your security or how your systems are secured. Compliance reports can be viewed by navigating from the dashboard to or be exported as PDF and Excel spreadsheets to communicate with other people or applications, which reads spreadsheets as input and feed them into their process. They can be generated to any point in the past to prove compliance. It's very important in the day of GDPR or any other act that you are under. The reports not only show actual values, but also requires the required ones and what is the wrong in the current settings. So they're self-explained. IronSphere uses dashboard to show you how secure is your system. The main view, the one which presented at the top of the screen, is organized by operating system groups like ZOS, ZVM, and so on. Each icon will show the highest severity level calculated to an OS in the group. By clicking on the OS group icon, you will access the audited system pane, which displays all systems in the OS group, like here. The list is organized by severity levels from higher to lower, left to right. The system view, the complete report, is accessed by clicking on a specific system at the audited system pane. IronSphere allows, but also requires a user to have a role defined to him or assigned. There are 4 types of roles: guest, which are the stakeholders, and they can view assigned STIGs groups depending on the roles. DBA see database findings, communications guy see communication-related STIG groups like FTP configuration, TCP/IP configuration, etc. So each of the units in the organization can see only what related to their role. Remember that these group the STIGs based on common area of coverage, like I said, TCP/IP, operating system, RACF, top secret, etc. There's a relation between the checks in the group. Another role is the auditor that can confirm process type checks. Remember that we discussed that the second type early in the presentation. These checks that cannot be determined programmatically. This role will be assigned to an independent auditor, and he can reset the severity level of the check, although nothing is checked, but he can reset that because he manually checked the situation. The security officer is a role that can see all check and auditing findings. The last role is administrator that can also configure the server. This means that he can define user, assign roles to them, and many other parameters which defines the server behavior. The views in the main body of the screen are limited by the user role and can be expanded to view details by clicking on the rows here, and we will see that later in more detail. IronSphere offers rich investigation tools and some other services. The left side menu can be used to export part or all of the finding. You can select specific checks by clicking the checkbox on the left side of the row to select them. You can investigate checks by comparing the check with other agents. You can see the history of the check and the risks, how they are divided between the STIG groups, where the majority of the risk came from, etc. The graphs helps to understand the big picture created by many checks listed in the system view. Clicking on a row in the system view pane displays the complete detailed report of the check clicked on. As you may see, at the bottom left side of the screen is the result table, which was created by the diagnostic routine. As we said, STIGs has predefined severity levels. If one or more security controls in the test are not set properly, the predefined severity level is assigned. So we calculated the overall severity levels, actual severity levels assigned to the checks, and accumulate them and divide them by the potential, because each check has a potential, predefined potential of severity, maybe assigned, maybe not, and the result is a percentage which obtains the monitored system risk score. So I want to summarize IronSphere offers rich functionality over standard STIG automation. Agents are configurable. You can set execution interval for any check. We report the STIG groups, and you can specify your confidentiality level. So the different organizations can have different checks based on their confidentiality level. The IronSphere server is a virtual appliance. This means that it is locked down solution accessible only from the browser. No one can access your data on the server. Otherwise, no way to access the data. We use roles not only to protect your findings from unauthorized users, but also to distribution of the management. Each stakeholder can view his own defects and respond to and fix them. You just need to see the graphs and overall calculated severity levels on the icons of the systems moving down. While manual assessments reports on layouts, IronSphere can be much more detailed as it's a program. So we can, for example, in the list of dataset access list, as I mentioned before, it can be very detailed and cover the entire access list and attributes of the profile, which protects the resource because it runs unattended. Time is not an issue here because it runs a few milliseconds and it's very efficient. We also offers a performance metrics of the individual diagnostic routines, letting you decide the interval and the time in day they will execute using a policy statement at the agent side. So you can adjust the STIGs to run when your machine is not overloaded. IronSphere is an open architecture product. You can develop your own diagnostic routines under several limitations, and even add your own STIG groups or configuration parameters to configure your checks outside of the checks. So you can write them once and control them by parameters. Nobody offers that, and they will be incorporated into the reports on the server, on the IronSphere server. Process type diagnostic, we mentioned that, are manually configured and confirmed by authorized user, usually a CPA or external audit service, or someone from your organization that you authorize, which considered half independent, and but you have support for the entire STIG set. This is the IronSphere logon screen. You have to specify user ID and password, and they will be checked against the Active Directory of your organization. But this is not, it's a prerequisite, but it's not enough because you have to have a role in the system. Otherwise, you won't be able to log on and you won't be able to view any of the findings in the system. So when you specify user ID and password and click login, the system will show the main view. You may remember that there are some other main views displayed in the presentation, which has more operating system groups displayed. In this demo system, we have only ZOS in the main view. The gauge shows the highest risk level measured for one of the agents from this family. So if we click here, we can see that we have two agents running on MVSA and MVSB with different security levels, severity levels. 66 is the highest one, so it's ordered from left to right, and this is one that will show in the main view. If we click on one of the systems here, we will go to the system view, which is the detailed report of the system. It has several parts, which we'll discuss now. First of all, is the title bar, and you can sort each columns by clicking on the title of the column. It will be sorted in two directions. The first one will change from ascending to descending, and the second one back. And you have some information about the system. It says it's MV, stands for MVS, R for RACF, and the rest is based on the family of the STIG, and the reference here is the STIG name from the STIG document itself. This is a time where the check was last run, so the report shows only the last runs of the reports of each of the checks. So it's up to date. If you run your system in a good way, as the agent should operate, you will see up-to-date security status of your system. Once displayed, you can drill down into the details of the report. So, for example, if I click on this line, as you can see, we can see the entire report, but within the entire report, we can see the specific check details. So this is the subject, or the title came from the STIG document itself, but it's not enough, because most people which are not mainframe users, we want to understand what is sys1 LPA lib, etc. So there is a description here, again, came from the STIG document, which explains what it's all about, why it's risk, the classification of the risk, in this case, data integrity, the operating system name and version of the agent, where the agent is running, who is responsible for fixing the finding, and this is how to fix the finding. And what the agent does, it sends you a result table, which says, which in this case, for example, it's sys1 LPA lib. So it will discuss sys1 LPA lib configuration in RACF in this case, because it's a RACF system. So it says the dataset is sys1 LPA lib. It is protected by sys1 dot asterisk, which is the profile. The field in concern is audit. It currently states failures only if you are trying to control the data set, for example, deleting that. But the requirement from the STIG is to have updates, and updates are not including. So what I'm trying to say here, we are saying not only what the error is, what the current value of the control, but also what is needed to be set. You can see that there are users which are not allowed because they're not part of the system group, or the groups which you specify in the configuration of the product that are part of the system group, or those that are allowed by the STIG to use the product. Another thing that we have, another functionality, is to compare the risk within the other agents of this family. So if you click compare, and we still kicked the line, you can see that we have two systems here, MVSA, MVSB, which are the audited systems of the ZOS family, on different dates, but on different severity. So this issue is not present on SysB, it's fixed. Again, we will reset the page. So we know the scope of the handling of the error. We can have a point-in-time report. This report reports what happens now in your system, but you can have a report referencing a date in the past, because if you need to show your compliance report at a specific date in the past, you can do that by specifying the date. Just click on point in time. You can filter results. Remember that the idea here is that everyone is responsible for his own risk. It's like you just have to maintain the list and maintains the users who are authorized to view the reports and part of the reports, but each person is responsible for his own finding and need to fix them, because you can't fix them yourself. You're a security officer, not a technician, nor a system programmer or DBA. So we can export that and can show them that, but they can see here in the list only and only what you are allowed them to see. So if I'm a DBA, I will only see DB2 here, or if I'm a RACF officer, I will see RACF. Communication guys will see all the communication families of STIG. We can also select on severity, filters the results by severity. In this case, that's what I asked for. So you can see we see only high severity findings. Another option here is to view some charts which shows you the big picture. The report shows the details which are specific to a system and specific for STIG family and specific for a check, a single check. Here we can see findings which are more information about the entire monitored system. We're still on sys MVSA, but we can see, for example, the distribution of checks which marked as with severity high, and we can see where our problems come from. And you can see that ACP, the operating system itself, the lists like APF, linked list, LPA, etc., are those that are more risky in our system. So it's a system programmer duty to fix them. 18% come from RACF, and the rest comes from SSH, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, you can select whatever you like. To see that 75s here come from RACF and only 25 come from AMV, etc. So you can have more visibility about your system, where it comes from, who is responsible, who makes most of your problems. Now you can dig into specific analysis, for example, the data analysis, AMV, and you can see that 15 checks are marked none, so it's relatively good because these are the most of the checks. Only one is low and 3 in medium, and you don't have high severity findings. If you're administrator, you can see some of the administration options here. You can connect the system to Active Directory, which probably that's what you would do. You can see the activity log, define users and their roles. You can define your own customer data, like your copyright statement, phone number, address, name, the data format, a logo if you have one, and number of days to alarm an inactivity of a check. If you see here, it's 250. If I change it to 150 and click submit and go back, if I look at, for example, MVSA, it will mark everything, every line which is not in the it's outside of the window of the last 150 days, to show you that those checks haven't run since that time. And you can see that the entire line is colored red, except the severity, to maintain the severity levels, the original severity levels, so you know where you are. In this case, you're able to send this report to the system programmer, which is responsible for your product, and say, hey, something is wrong with IronSphere because my baseline interval is 12 hours, and a day passed, and those checks haven't run since, so we have a problem. Another, let me change that again because it's, I want to show more information about that. So another option is to have an idea what is happening in your system, how healthy is IronSphere agent. You can click here. There is a mailbox which tells you what is happening. For example, if the check is not able to perform well on the mainframe, for example, because is not the user which runs the check is not authorized to verify the resource, is not authorized to query RACF, is not authorized to list the control file, palmlib, whatsoever it is, Unix system services configuration file, you'll get a message, the user ID, the command in question, or what he was trying to do, and how to fix the problem. So you can send it to the person, for in this case, the system programmer, who is responsible for managing system products and security products as well, because he's the one who installed them. If he fixed the problem, you can remove the message. So as you can see, IronSphere is very simple. It aims someone which is not a mainframe expert. He doesn't have any understanding of the mainframe, but he knows that in a scale of low to high, the problem is marked high, so it's really high. The severity is high. He knows what the problem is about and how to solve it and who should solve it. So he doesn't have to be a mainframer, but he knows what it is, how to fix it, who is responsible for that. And at the bottom line, there is a better possibility that the problem will be fixed and your system security level will be well and will be in compliance. So thank you, and we will answer questions now if you have.